here to tell you about artificial intelligence. That's going to be the topic we're going to discuss for the next hour or so. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm talking and what I'll be talking about. So I'm a professor in the accounting department here. I've been here for 3 years. I also direct the new Maze Innovation Research Center, which is a brand new research center that we launched last August, a year ago. And we are dedicated to studying innovation, how it happens, why it works, and how it makes markets and society more free. So that is our mission. Lowry Mays has been our benefactor, as well as Charles Koch. And those two men have spent their lives around innovation, and so it was very appropriate that they funded our center. We have big dreams. We want to be able to work with all units across campus, engage students in research, and really stay at the cutting edge of what's happening at A&M. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that today. So I'm an economist. I earned my PhD in economics from Stanford about more than a decade ago. That means that, so you'd be surprised, but economics and social science generally has a lot to say about artificial intelligence. You might think that it's only in the domain of the engineers, but actually business schools like ours have a lot to say. And the future of AI, believe it or not, is going to involve much more social science than anyone would expect. So I'll tell you and explain how that works. So what is AI? Now, artificial intelligence it's sort of a kitchen sink of a definition. It's a big umbrella of many different disciplines, some from statistics, probability theory, economics, optimization, operations research, computer science, computer vision. It's all kind of been put under this one umbrella called artificial intelligence. And so the question is more, what is not artificial intelligence? And so it's a big area, and I can't talk about everything in just in the time here, but I'll just give you kind of a flavor and a taste of what it is and how it works. So if I had to say the core concept that I'd like you to take away with today, if someone asks you in an elevator in the next year, what is AI? It is really all about what's called the agent. Okay? The agent is the core conceptual construct behind artificial intelligence. The agent is a fictitious creature that is rational and that responds to different commands as well as different rules about what to do in its environment. And so all AI has this in common, that there's an agent that the human designs, and designs that agent to behave on its own. So whether that's a vacuum cleaner that's moving around on a floor, or whether it's a bot that's checking your emails, or whether it's a car that's driving or a rocket that's flying, the core concept is that how do you design the system for the agent, and what is the agent doing and not doing? Okay? So that's the one main concept behind all of the theoretical work behind artificial intelligence. So it turns out the main application, and A&M is really all about applications, is autonomous driving. And this is something that we are making big investments in as a university. The Chancellor just created the RELIS campus recently, and that is largely going to be around autonomous transportation, trucks, cars. We're actually getting into boats and underwater vehicles, submarines. So autonomous transportation is, especially driving, is our biggest application of AI. Okay? And so the early innings of the game, we're in the early innings of the game, and I would say where we are today is we basically solved what's called the single agent problem. The single agent problem is how do you make a car move on its own? And how do you make it operate on its own and drive on its own and move just by itself? And that is not perfect, but we are close to basically solving that. You're going to have issues about sensing and different conditions and fog and so on, but largely it's been solved. So let me tell you where we are today on that research. Where A&M is, I can show you a video of our recent research of one of our autonomous cars that basically can drive almost completely by itself. Great. So that's, I would say, phase one of autonomous driving. We've cracked that nut. This was a video that was a project actually done almost entirely by students, believe it or not. There were a few faculty advisors across multiple colleges who were giving them some basic direction, but mostly students did this. There was a nationwide competition where A&M came in second, and General Motors was providing the vehicles. So.
My son was on that.
Oh, is that right?
Didn't mean to derail, but
that's great.
Cool to connect the dots.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
Congratulations.
Yeah. So the car, as you saw, was it's called waypoint following, which is how can it follow along a wave. So right now, AI can do that very well. But the bigger question actually has to do with what we call the multi-agent problem. How do multiple agents interact with one another? And that's the next phase of AI, and that is still largely unsolved. And that's also where social science has a lot to say about that. And the reason is that when you involve multiple cars, you are now in the world of game theory, because you have to ask yourself how one car is going to behave in response to another car. Most accidents happen between two cars or two vehicles, and so if they are both autonomous, or if one is autonomous and the other is not, you still need to figure out how to coordinate the driving patterns between vehicles. And this is a much harder problem, and it's a much bigger problem. It's also something where this will engage social science. So economics as a field has made a lot of inroads into this, because economics studies multi-agent systems where you have groups of distributed agents. In this case, the application could be to cars, and these agents have to make decisions about how to operate in an environment where there are other agents. Okay? And so that is fundamentally a problem of game theory, and this is why artificial intelligence is now kind of bringing in social science, and the most exciting work is in solving multi-agent problems. And that's where our center is also making a lot of inroads in this second phase of AI. And so specifically, actually, there's a question about infrastructure. Okay, so infrastructure is let me just back up a little bit and tell you, right now, the major companies in autonomous driver, Tesla, Uber, and so on, they are building, and Google, they're building very smart cars and putting them on dumb roads, which is our existing roads. And the academic community in engineering has largely concluded that the roads need to be smarter. For AI to really work, for driving to really happen at scale and in a way that's safe, and people will be comfortable with the fatality rates, which will be some, hopefully, but less than what we have today, then we need to improve the infrastructure. And that means moving some of the intelligence off of the vehicle and into the road, actually. And that area, that concept, is what our next phase of research is here at A&M, and is called infrastructure-enabled autonomous driving. What is unique about this is that the cars now, we're still using autonomous cars, but they shut off all the sensors. And there are these poles, if you see these orange, this is actually what's called a roadside unit, you'll see the video in a second, which has all the sensors in the road, in this roadside unit, and that is what is navigating the cars. And that's the next leap, which is trying to understand, can the road, the infrastructure, provide navigation, the AI sitting in the infrastructure, for not just one vehicle, but multiple vehicles. And the multiple vehicle question is where this is trying to answer. So here is a video we took also at the Rellis campus in the last year. impressive. It's just a car going in a circle. But small step for man, giant step for mankind. The roadside unit, that orange pole was driving the car. That's what was unique. The people in the car had no control over the car. They were just there for emergencies. So the first step is to understand how can infrastructure play a role. And this is where the current research on autonomous driving at A&M, and actually at multiple universities, is moving. And trying to understand what that world will look like. This is now much more than just engineering, actually. And so this is a much bigger problem of trying to combine both technical developments and technology with we have to have policies in place and regulation. There's going to be new industries that will be created. The toll booth operators of the future will be entirely new, will be responsible for these sophisticated tolling mechanisms. And so there's a lot more than just technical engineering involved. And this is why we've been trying to lead the charge on this. We will be having a conference on infrastructure-based autonomous driving next year, probably in June, so stay tuned for that. We're going to send out sign-up sheets. Matthew will send those along, so if you are interested in any of these ideas, please write your email and we'll send you the details. We're going to do a conference next year, and also I'm going to give you some homework because you're back in class. There's an essay we have on this problem of infrastructure-based driving. You can pick it up on your way out. And that'll tell you a little bit about all of this new world that's being created by autonomous driving. Okay. So, to me, really, where at the highest level, what's happening is there are several moving parts. There are the auto manufacturers that are now trying to create more autonomous cars, but also there will be a role for the government to decide whether it wants to make smart infrastructure, and if so, how to do that, and how to do that without taking over and ruining the project. So our plan is, the reason we're going to we were talking to policymakers is we want to come up with a clear path towards privatization, so this doesn't just become some bulky government program, but rather there's new businesses and new industries that will be created around this entire new world of autonomous transportation. In my opinion, right now we're at one corner where the cars are, all the intelligence is in the cars, and they're trying to figure out how to go on the roads that we have today. We probably won't go to the other end, where the other end is where all the intelligence is in the roads, but we're going to land in the middle somewhere. And what will happen is we'll need to figure out what that middle looks like, and how much intelligence is in the roadside unit, and how much is in the vehicle. Right now, the estimates show that putting the infrastructure is actually cheaper than putting it all in the car, because you can scale it. You can make an intersection situationally aware for about $30,000, whereas the car you just saw itself costs $250,000. So distributing the sensors among the infrastructure may even be economically worthwhile, and most likely more safe. But you have issues of cybersecurity and then also political rent seeking that could occur. Yes, please.
Have they looked at technology using satellites, like used in aviation?
Oh, like drones?
No, so in aviation they have now satellite-controlled transponders in all airplanes, so you have ADS-B.
Uh-huh.
So you know where every plane is relevant to every other plane. So aircraft controllers know where every plane is because they all have ADS-Bs, modern transponders.
Right.
I feel like that technology would work in this.
There's a version of that called DSRC, short-range communication, and I think they're still trying to figure out what the right protocols will be. But there's still
If you did that, you wouldn't need any ground-based. You wouldn't need any ground-based.
Right. You mean the cars are just communicating with each other?
Well, yeah, to satellite. So satellite controls cars.
Right.
You don't need anything on the ground.
So to my knowledge, no one has done that yet.
We should do that here.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Frank?
In your research, have you determined whether or not Google is collaborating with Tesla or vice versa, or are they totally independent as it relates to their technology?
So here's what we can. So we don't have any inside baseball on the companies. We just know what we read through the magazines about the talent war. But it seems like the methods across the companies are more similar than they are different, because there's sort of a standard body of knowledge that they're all leaning on, and it's a mix of like AI plus computer vision and you know, it's just, there's kind of slicing the apple in slightly different ways, but they're basically doing the same thing. The big leap forward would be, and no one's doing this yet, except you know some people in universities, is trying to move the intelligence out of the car into other places like infrastructure. That's something that a university can afford to do because it doesn't have a profit line.
What other areas outside of the auto industry are you working in innovation, like healthcare or like adherence meds or remote health monitoring? What else do you?
Yeah, so we haven't started our healthcare initiative yet. Our other big area. So on the autonomous side, we're starting to get into underwater vehicles, and so believe it or not, A&M has a really great ocean engineering department, and so it's actually an easier problem because you don't have to worry about laws and regulations in the ocean, and so that's the next cusp of innovation in autonomous transportation. They've already made a lot of great investments in trucking. I'm going to talk next about our work in labor platforms and the future of work. And then we have small research areas that we're building out in healthcare and energy, but they're too early to talk about. So we're just getting those started, because we're just brand new. We just started last year.
Thanks.
Yeah. Great. Yes?
I have the basics of automated cars and stuff is probably pretty straightforward, I can say, but what about the unexpected? How do you program for something unexpected happening?
Yes, that's not easy to do. I can tell you what's happening now and what the challenges are for doing that. This is what I can say from what I've seen of the research, both ours and elsewhere, is that machines also make mistakes, but they make different mistakes than humans. So at scale, I do believe that the autonomous cars will have fewer accidents of the kind that we have today, but we may have other accidents that we don't even know about because we've moved towards an autonomous future. And that is where like you have issues with systemic risk, where the system as a whole could collapse, and especially if there's a lot of similarity between the algorithms of what the different units are doing. And that's something that we're going to discuss at our conference.
I mean, the computer's going to have to start learning before we can eliminate them all.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true. But I mean, so right now we've got 40,000 plus fatalities per year still today on U.S. highways, and so I do believe that the equilibrium fatality rate will be lower with driving eventually. But to get there, some people will. I mean, it's not going to happen without any costs. You know, as a society, we need to figure out how to do that.
Collateral damage.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the arguments for infrastructure-based is that it probably is safer because you have more coordination, and you can see if you can see where the cars are at a more macro scale, that would probably be better. But there's cybersecurity risk because you could hack the central server, and there's also political risk that it could be taken over as a large government program, and it's not efficiently privatized. So those are the things we want to discuss in our conference.
You probably part of it that you want government help, but you don't want oversight and running it. So how is that funded on a national scope infrastructure?
Right. That's right. No, those are big questions we need to address. Right now, most of the major highways are privatized, so we're actually in a good place for that. And so part of the problem is that the government doesn't have this technology in-house, so it's got to rely on private firms like EasyPass to create these toll roads in Houston. It's just that we need to make sure that there's going to be a lot of economic analysis on how to design these privatization plans so that it stays that way and it doesn't get co-opted. And so my opinion is that the infrastructure the shift towards infrastructure is inevitable because I don't believe that, just look at what happened with the Tesla crash in Arizona. There's a huge backlash. And so people are going to want, whether it's good or for ill, they have kind of a higher standard when it comes to a machine driving than humans driving it. And because the only way to really get there is through some sort of infrastructure program. And we want to make sure that if that does happen, that it's effectively privatized and not made locked up inside government. And that's what your homework is about. Yeah. Great. Okay. Any other questions about the driving program we're doing? No. Great. Yeah,
Quick
please.
question. Yeah, do you guys have like a security component to the current research?
We're just starting that. We just hired a fellow in the Bush School, actually, one of our 2 hires from the Innovation Center. He's a cybersecurity fellow at Stanford. And he just joined. I was active in recruiting him last year. And his whole area is about how do you come up with private sector solutions to cybersecurity. And so he's going to work on that, or that's at least what he told me. Yeah. Okay, great. So let me tell you next about our second big area, which is on the future of work. What? Oh, is that right? Okay. Okay, great. So the future of work is our other big area. It's actually something where this is squarely within the area of social science. And let me tell you a little bit about the research we're doing as well as our long-term vision. And so we want to understand what the workplace will look like in not just 5 or 10 years, but 50 or 100 years. A longer horizon than comes out of the McKinsey Global Institute or the Department of Labor. We want to think really long-term, try to think and identify big economic themes that are going to be relevant for this. So as a first cut, there's sort of a myth out there that man and machine are sort of in competition, and that robots are going to rule the world one day and they'll take over all our jobs. So our research says that that's not true, not the case. Machines are just making humans more productive, not less, and they open up new opportunities for them to reallocate their time and labor elsewhere. So, so that's largely this concept of machine and man are complements, not substitutes. They reinforce each other, not they don't substitute away from each other. So when the bicycle was invented, that didn't stop people from walking, right? It just allowed people to move, to cover greater distances. And so we expect the same thing to happen in the workplace. How it happens, of course, is actually what we're trying to understand. Okay, so just some background how we got started on this. My only job outside of academia was I worked in the Bush White House from 2008 to 2009 during the financial crisis. It was not my fault. And I noticed something actually about the White House, just as one unique organization. We were one of, our department, our unit had about 20 people, and we reported up to the president. And here we had frequent meetings with him. For the record, we're not holding hands. But one thing I noticed about the president is that he doesn't actually do that much. He's got a staff of 5,000 people, and he just kind of sits in his office, the Oval Office, and kind of sees people and makes decisions. But they, it's sort of he has all the work is sort of done by this huge anonymous staff that is coming up from within outside of the White House in the executive office. And so that observation actually, I combined that with the second fact, which is that the internet is expanding, and it's expanding big time. These are Google balloons that are sending the internet around the world. And what's happening is that there are going to be in the next decade or two 1 billion, 2 billion people who are coming online for the first time in their lives. This is a huge economic transformation that's happening that no one talks about. So you're getting it here at the ground floor. And the internet is going to need to change in order to really capture the potential of these people. Right now, the internet is based off of consumption. You go to Netflix to watch movies, Amazon to buy DVDs and so on, or whatever, eBay to buy some collectibles. But the people who are coming online in the next decade or two, they are poor, mostly from poor countries, and they will not have any. They are not consumers. They will largely be producers. They're going to bring their labor to the global market. And then capturing, the greatest opportunity, in my opinion, is capturing that human capital. How do you harness that talent in an effective way? And it will change the nature of work in the developed world also, as well as the path of what AI will do in the future. It's already happening now. It's happening in its early stages, but it's going to accelerate big time as these new workflows come online. Okay, so this is what I would call the next billion workers project. Okay, and really, what will these workers will today when they come online, they have very low levels from our own research, are low levels of education and skills, but they have enormous potential and time. And so they will put some pressure on both American workers as well as allow opportunities for new kinds of work to happen. Okay. So let me tell you about some of our research in this area and what we've discovered and what we think can happen in the future. So almost like with that analogy with President Bush, I think the American worker is no longer going to be doing work himself. You will no longer have a full-time employee who's just doing things for you, but rather he's kind of like the president who is going to have a large staff that he can rely on, which is going to be a distributed international labor pool that is liquid and on demand, and where jobs and tasks will be allocated through technology. And so that is a future that we believe will happen and actually should happen, and that we need to prepare for it and understand it. Some of the key insights that we've developed in this is that artificial intelligence will have a role in creating these marketplaces. Okay, so already the marketplaces and the platforms of the world are those few companies have enormous profits, and they're mostly based on consumption. We believe you will see an entirely new set of companies that will harness this. They'll be designed to harness this human capital and create new work platforms. And that will be that will involve a different kind of AI than the driving problem, but it's still AI, and it's about how do you assess talent globally, and how do you distribute work through a global network, global on-demand network. So don't think anymore about individuals, full-time employees, but imagine everyone's a contractor, and there are ways to identify your skills, and those tasks and jobs can move around the world extremely quickly at any moment.
You said talent assessment. What about talent augmentation or training if they're low educated? Will AI play a role in the talent, bringing talent level up?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's actually my third bullet point, but let me get to it right
Sorry.
now.
No. I'm happy to wait.
Are you sure? Okay, let's wait for that. Yeah. I had another hand.
I will. How do these people self-identify their skills and expertise? Or are you contemplating somebody who can judge or referee, right? If I'm an employer and I'm going to just hire people on the basis of what they can do, how do I know they're right?
Right now, there's no good way for certification, and certification is a huge problem. You try to hire a web developer or a designer or someone to make slides for PowerPoint or a project manager, you have to believe what they say. And the problem, it's very noisy, and there are thousands, if not millions, of people applying for these jobs. But that's an opportunity, because what will happen is companies will develop, in our opinion, and should develop, to figure out really accurate skill assessment. And this is different than university education, right? We're talking about how do you, a billion people coming online from Africa and Asia, finding out ways to actually figure out their true contribution and talent to the global labor market. That's a big problem, and it's not going to be solved by any one company, but rather whole industries will have to, in our opinion, will evolve around. So it's not going to be easy, but there are some initial steps to try to do this. Yeah.
Kind of from the Bernie Sanders perspective, how's this going to impact income inequality, income stratification in the United States? It's already sort of an issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. So here's what we can say. Right now, I'll be totally honest, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for the U.S. We've run experiments on our own platforms where we benchmark U.S. undergraduates against a nurse in the Philippines versus a farmer in Pakistan. And here's what we realize. Okay,
Professors in China.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, is that the first time they do a task or some kind of research job that we give them, they kind of mess it up because they don't know our language and our culture and so on. But and they're charging maybe 10% of what an American worker would. But a little bit of investment in skill development increases their productivity 10 to 20x. And that fact is actually what's scary about this, is that the distribution of talent around the world is much more uniform than you would like to think. And in the long term, I think this will redistribute some wealth through the market economy. Now, there will be winners and losers in this, but you know, I believe that overall the world will be better. But some of the losers will be people in higher paid jobs, some in the U.S. So that's why, in my opinion, it's important for us to get ahead of this transformation rather than behind it. Let's acknowledge it and then understand how we can develop and adjust our skills in the U.S. for this, what will eventually happen. Yeah, Jerome?
On this point, you're talking about individuals. This has effects on nations. I would think China and India and so forth, with the big populations that they have, are going to be a huge advantage instead of redistributing GDP and all the other kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so the U.S. is going to be behind the eight ball, I think. I mean, listening to what I'm understanding you say.
So I think it could go either way. I don't know that it's just going to be a game of numbers. Because you know it's still the case that the highest value, the rents accrue to the people who can create these platforms, and creativity in both liberal arts and technical skills. That combination is going to have the most value. But that's the big question. What's going to happen in the future? For sure, there's going to be some rebalancing, and from our preliminary research, it's all in the direction that the people with the numbers, with large numbers, will generally benefit, and the smaller populations with high wages will generally lose. But not everyone not everyone in the U.S., for example. Like an example would be, let me give an example would be medical transcription, right? 20 years ago, a medical transcriptionist in the U.S. would be paid $20 an hour to type the whole transcription herself. 5 years ago, someone in the Philippines could be paid maybe $5 an hour to do that same job. Now, what we've done is you can get that down to AI doing most of the transcription, and then having a human clean it up for the last section for about $2 an hour. And so and that job has moved from India to the Philippines and now to Bangladesh. And so that's just what we've seen across a few certain job categories, but we're observing that it's happening elsewhere. One of the projects we're starting this year is understanding freelancing in America, and we're interviewing people across the U.S. actually to understand people who are not working in the kind of the W-2 labor market, but rather who are working as contractors, why they do that, how they get there, their challenges and opportunities. And we actually are collaborating with two major platforms in Silicon Valley on this. And so they're very excited with us because we're in Texas, and a lot of people in the middle of the country are in this labor market, so we want to understand that. Blake.
All right, so when email was invented, the internet was invented, it was supposed to make us a lot more productive. And I would say that that's been relatively inefficient compared to what it could do, because all we seem to be is a little bit busier rather than more action-oriented. How will going to this platform, to AI, be exponentially better instead of just incrementally better?
Okay, let me answer that in a way that's a little controversial. Okay, so I agree with you. Technology has made some things easier. Not necessarily has always improved our lives. Nowadays, if I want to book a flight, I have to find everything through Kayak, go through all the transactions myself. Whereas before, I had a travel agent. So what I think will happen is, because we will have a large pool of people moving online, we will return a little bit to that old model where there were more people involved in your life. And so one of the experiments we've run is it possible to conduct research tasks in our center without actually doing the research ourselves? Can we outsource it to other people? And the answer is yes, we can do that. So that future, I think, will be a little controversial because it will shift the way we interact with technology. Overall, there will be gains because you're providing employment for others, but also freeing up time for yourself. So I think it's odd, but one path is that our life in the future may look a little bit more like the 70s than it does now. Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like with the old adage of computers are supposed to make everything paperless?
Right, right. And now
it's kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, exactly right. There's actually this is actually a whole area of research that we're co-sponsoring called human computation. How do you build technologies that really enhance and provide capabilities for humans to be involved? Right? So again, today most technology, like we have Concur in the business school, which requires you to now do all your expense reports. But in the future, more technology will be built that will be capturing all of this extra talent. And that's the great opportunity that I think is ahead of us. Yeah. So that's what our research so far has been pointing towards. Okay, so AI will be vital in terms of the actual platform design. I've covered some of these. Disintermediation, I think, will be part of our future, which is it's already happening now. Before, instead of the middleman, technology has always collapsed the world, and so now the platforms and technology will be contracting directly between the buyer and the seller. So we'll have fewer middlemen, and so a lot of what companies will do will change, and so companies of the future will really be interacting directly with individuals through internet-mediated technology. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Amazon in the consumer space, right? There will be some Amazon in the labor space, which I think would do this to take advantage of this transformation. Skill development and education. I think this is actually the undiscovered country of opportunity. Of how do you really reconceive of education in an AI mediated world? So. Some of the things we've noticed, so this is your question of skill development, is that a little bit of skill development goes a long way. But when we're talking skill development, we're not talking about reading Socrates. We're talking about actual task-specific skills that is different than what's happening in four-year colleges. So skill development has huge value, but it has to be embedded inside of kind of a technology platform to really be useful for the crowd. So today we operate, there's kind of two communities. There's the higher education, formal education community, and there's also on top of that sort of an online education community. And then there are these work platforms like Upwork and Amazon Mechanical Turk. These two kind of need to start merging together. You need to combine the skill development with the education, and that's where a lot of opportunity will come from. And that's what we've seen in our own research, that once you combine a little bit of education with the work platform and connect the two in a very direct way, there's huge impacts on productivity from that. And then, yeah. The long-term goal is for us to understand where innovation in the U.S. And in the world takes place, and can we distribute it outside of where it currently is today. Right now, innovation is maybe locked inside an office in Apple, but as more and more people come online and people are operating through distributed networks, can you crowdsource innovation? And not just the work that the standard, right now the work that people do online is pretty much very close to what a computer could do. It's kind of like digital grunt work. But the future will be about really, can you use the internet and technology to crowdsource innovation and creativity? Take creative jobs, innovative jobs, and then distribute that to the network. That is where I think there's a lot of opportunity, and that's something that our center is really interested in. What innovation will look like in the future of work.
Right. Seems like a headwind of that would just be IP and like ownership for commercial reasons, right?
Right.
Back to private versus public.
Yeah.
For private organization to outsource innovation would be hard to maintain.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's some early answers to that. There's a company out of Berkeley called Crowdbotics, and they crowdsource software development. And the way they've done it is that they have a network of developers, and each one only works on one little piece of the puzzle. So no one developer sees the whole thing. Kind of the way Steve Jobs ran Apple, right? And then they couldn't do anything with this one module. And so the platform, it does all the coordination. So that's a little bit of, that provides a little bit of assurance, but it needs to be addressed.
That assumes you know what you're doing, so you can slice it up. If you're trying to innovate something new,
yeah.
you always know where you're headed, right? It's hard
It's
to
a
ride
recipe
it
for
fast.
a gazillion defects.
What's that?
It's a recipe for a gazillion defects.
Yeah, yeah. If things don't, if there's no coordination, it could have a lot of problems. Okay, so let me just. Oh, I have more homework for you. So on this topic, I have another reading for you to do if you want to. We have an essay that I wrote on this topic of the future of work and sort of this transformation of bringing new people online. We are going to host a conference next September 27th, with the Private Enterprise Research Center, which is a major research center on campus, on the future of work. And it's going to really be cross-disciplinary, so they're closely related to the economics department. We're going to bring our faculty from the business school and from computer science, and we're going to take all the cutting-edge research, try to think hard about this problem. We have that September 27th, right around, I guess, the 51st anniversary. So if you sign up for our newsletter, we'll send you information. So that's what we're excited about. And this year we are, this space is, I would say, it's a mix. It's a really interdisciplinary space. It's a mix of economics, social science, and computer science, and even psychology. So it's a lot of different players are coming together. Other questions? Okay.
How much?
Yeah,
Can I ask one at a time?
Yeah, please.
So how much of what you're thinking about the future of work is impacting the way that we're educating May's business students? Because in essence today, 20 years ago when I learned as an accountant student, 50% is already digitized, the rest can be digitized pretty quickly. So how is that connection happening? So that my kid's not learning how to do journal entries exclusively when it's really not even a necessary function anymore. So I have good and bad news. Unfortunately, it's mostly bad news. So the bad news is that our curriculum is still behind the curve, in my opinion. Okay, so the dean may disagree, but in my opinion, our curriculum is behind the curve, and it hasn't fully embraced exactly what you said, which is the fact that we still teach debits and credits probably more than we kind of need. And auditing, for example, as taught in our department, does not really take advantage of the fact that AI is doing most of the auditing now anyway. So the skill set for the future is really going to be this combination of business and technology. And this is most people know this, but actually making behavioral change, like big decisions about that, is sometimes hard. Who's doing the best job of making that differentiation in their education?
I would probably say the top, believe it or not, the top places at the top technical universities are doing that. So when I was at, there was a program at Stanford called the Symbolic Systems, which is exactly that. It's like getting an engineer to be able to talk to, or a business person to be able to talk fluently with engineers. So like in our center, I've even seen this. We have students, and the most productive students are the ones who can balance this, straddle these two worlds. And for sure, it's a mix. Like the pure engineers they don't have the business skills, but if they're exclusively business, then they don't have the technical foundations. So the cross communication between the two is going to be vital. That's the bad news. The good news is that actually A&M is a good place for this, because it would require some big strategic moves by leadership. But if that happened, and if this was a priority, then it could easily happen here, because we have skills in both. But right now, the engineer, what I discovered just from running my center, this is a big university, and there are a lot of silos, and it's very easy to just stay wrapped up in your own little world, and just be comfortable in your own universe. It's much harder to reach out to other units and in a way that's meaningful. So that needs to happen much more, honestly. Okay, great. Other questions? Anything at all?
Well, you just talked about the culture change within the university. Any culture change obviously is difficult to test. How?
How to do it? That's a good question. That's a good question. So I guess the easy answer is leadership at the top. It's all determined by the tone at the top. I think that
the tone at the top, starting with the president and going down to the deans.
Yeah.
Of every college.
That would
Getting them to coordinate.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah. So I would say, again, this is just from my vantage point. I think the deans that I've seen, when I see them interact with each other, they are friendly, but they're not like friends. You know, so they need to all become closer friends. They need to, they need to really like not see themselves as operating in their own little domain, but actually want to collaborate and innovate with each other. So that doesn't happen as much as, and I feel that because when I work with faculty across universities, I have to break through all these barriers that would have been easier if someone at the top would just kind of open those doors for me.
These things are on people's report card, whether it's a dean or professor or whoever.
Right.
That's not what they're getting graded on.
Yeah, exactly right. The second one is they have to change the incentives. They have to fundamentally change the incentives for faculty and probably students also to be more explicitly interdisciplinary. And there's a lot of hot air talk about interdisciplinary research on campus. If the rules don't change, if the incentives don't change, nothing is going to change. So people will still just only publish in one, I want to just publish in my one journal that my 20 colleagues understand and no one else.
Tier 1 research school, that's what we get. At the end of the day, that's what we're evaluating.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Tier 2 research, we're already researched. They're researching from me.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
The atmosphere, though, is what you're talking about, is eventually won't it also be what the upcoming adults and students, college students are going to want to learn, and that's also going to help change?
I think you're asking, can you ever engender cultural change from the top?
I think you can. I think you can, but I think the provost would have to take just stronger moves and stronger, just more than just rhetoric, which is where we are now. I think the actual, the rhetoric has to be changed into actual procedures. Promotion and tenure have to be, they have to be redone and reevaluated with respect to more interdisciplinary collaboration. So example is like we have huge commercial opportunities at A&M that we're not really utilizing at all, given that we have $1 billion of research coming through our university. And the amount of commercialization that's happening is almost embarrassing relative to the size of the research money that's flowing through. So that needs to change also. But it has to be, I have my own views on this, but there are specific actions that universities have to take. Yes, please.
Simple and practical question. What skills and knowledge do undergraduates need in order to be working with you on research? Like what preparation do they need to be useful or able to stick in?
So we hire across multiple functions, and we have teams actually. We've got 35 students in our center, and we've got teams of different sizes and levels. So graduate as well as undergraduate. We're basically split half engineering and roughly, no, not even half engineering, I would say half technical and half qualitative. And so qualitative includes business plus economics, social science broadly, engineering and math and liberal arts. Engineering, math, and science is in the technical area. So we're sort of half and half. And so we recruit people within each of these areas. But then as they get to the center, the more senior ones are the ones who can communicate across different functions. And that skill is very important. It's very hard to assess. It's like what, sadly, it's what the Supreme Court said about pornography. It's hard to define, but you know when you see it. So it's very hard to look.
How do you cultivate that?
Yeah, so we're trying to actually. So here's an example. We have this mechanical engineering project. We have an undergraduate, 4.0 in mechanical engineering. His name is Hunter. He works in our center. He's embedded in the lab in mechanical engineering, but he has to present to us in English an explanation of what he did that week. So he's writing a journal, he's giving slides, continually talking to us about what he's doing. No one else in engineering has that requirement, but we make them do that because we care about that skill set. And then on the other side, we have developers, software developers, and we have sort of a community of developers. So if someone wants to learn how to code, we can actually have we have that facility inside of our center if someone from English wants to learn how to code. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to run these experiments. Great. Let me just conclude with Well, to me, actually the whole reason I'm here, the students of our center, they are my greatest pride and joy. We have 35 students. These kids are, they're great kids. They come from all over Texas, mostly from small towns. Sometimes, often the first time in their family to go to college. Sometimes from single-parent families. And watching them unlock their potential has been the greatest professional joy that I've had in my life. And so, I came to A&M from, I lived in the coasts of the United States, from Palo Alto, Chicago, Washington, D.C. And while I admire our faculty, I would say I adore our students. And they are the full potential and the future of our university. And that, to me, is who we are really fighting for, is to provide opportunities for them to both engage in research and to unlock all of their innovative and creative capabilities. I always feel like while I learn from them as much as they learn from me, I feel like I educate their mind and they really educate my spirit. And so I think in the future we want to make sure that our program in our centers is very much student run and student motivated, and we want to keep everyone engaged with our center, so we'll hopefully stay in touch with all of you going forward. Great, that's all I have.
Thank you.